Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
Action!
Welcome to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. If you love old movies, Hollywood history, or the golden age of filmmaking, you've come to the right place. This is the podcast that talks about amazing stories of Tinseltown from another era. Hear fascinating conversations with writer-producer Steve Cubine, who quite literally lives just beneath the Hollywood sign, and actress-writer Nan McNamara. Now your hosts, Steve and Nan.
Steve, the Academy Awards are almost here. I'm so excited.
It's our Super Bowl.
It is. I always love that you call it our Super Bowl. It truly is our Super Bowl.
Oh, any cinephile or film fan, it is our Super Bowl.
Yes, and in honor of that, we are dropping this episode a day early.
Woohoo!
So let's just dive in because we have so much to talk about in terms of the history of the Academy Awards.
I know, because so many people don't really realize how the ceremony started or even that much about the Academy itself. So we're going to get into all of that.
I learned through Michael Schulman's book about the Oscars that Louis B. Mayer started the Academy Awards, but not for the altruistic reasons that one might think. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it was really a ploy to keep the unions from being formed, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Louis B. Mayer, he saw the writing on the wall with some of the unions that were starting to form back then.
Right.
And so in the late 20s, he wanted to create this organization that could basically dispute labor issues without having a union, and also to kind of give the motion picture business a better image.
Yes, because there was so much drug use and all kinds of scandals, which we have talked about on this podcast. So he was trying to put some shine on that image.
Yeah, but in a manipulative way, keep his people from unionizing.
Even in terms of the name, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences was a very carefully crafted language.
Totally thought out to give it an air of importance and dignity.
Right.
Which before, I mean, people in the movie business were not viewed very well back then. They were kind of carny trash.
Right. Okay, so it forms actually as a nonprofit in May of 1927. They have a meeting, they get people to join the group. So in the 30s, exactly what Louis B. Mayer didn't want to have happen started to happen.
Yes.
The unions start to emerge.
Which was inevitable.
Exactly. And Frank Capra is president of the Academy at the time, and he sees the writing on the wall. He sees that people don't want to be involved in this fighting and contract negotiations, and the Academy is getting a bad name. The only thing people love about the Academy are the awards. And so wasn't it Frank Capra that sort of said, hey guys, let's get rid of this?
Yes, because during the Great Depression, the Academy sided with the big studios. And the studios at the time were trying to get their workers to voluntarily reduce their wages and things like that.
Right.
Well, the workers were not having it. The Academy supported the studios. So that was pretty much the beginning of the end for the Academy being any type of labor dispute organization.
Right. Let's talk about the very first ceremony.
Yes.
So different than what we know now.
So different. You know, the first award was held May 16th, 1929. It was this private dinner banquet at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. There were only about 270 people there.
Okay.
They gave out 15 awards, and those awards were given out by the Academy president, who was also the host, Douglas Fairbanks.
Yes.
And the ceremony lasted 15 minutes.
I thought it was interesting, too, that tickets cost only $5, which is, the research I did, it's $85.21 in 2022 language, so it's probably a little bit more now, but $5.
Right,
$5
I know.
gets you in.
Very different from now. A little tidbit, which I found interesting, was there's actually a very first Academy Award winner because the guy who won Best Actor was Emil Jannings, and he won for The Last Command and The Way of All Flesh. He had to return to Europe before the ceremony was going to take place. So the Academy agreed to give him his Oscar early. So he has become officially the very first Oscar winner.
Oh, wow.
Because he got it early.
Because he got it early.
Yeah.
That's like Lin-Manuel Miranda at the LA Drama Critics Circle Awards. I was like, who's that kid? And why is he getting his award early, way before Hamilton? I was like, oh, okay, that's Lin-Manuel.
Got it.
Yeah. So the awards were not recorded. They were not, obviously not on television.
It was basically just a bunch of friends who worked in the business getting together for a nice banquet and giving each other awards.
Yeah. But by the second year,
yeah,
it at least has grown enough in enthusiasm that it becomes broadcast on the radio.
Exactly. And in the early days, and I think this is interesting, you could win an Academy Award for a body of work, which basically took place over the prior 2 years of your career.
Right.
So you'll notice that Emil Jannings won for 2 films, and the Best Actress winner, who was Janet Gaynor, she won for 3 films, Seventh Heaven, Street Angel, and Sunrise.
Which is a really interesting way of doing it. And there are years that, as we've talked about, the Jessica Lange years, where you're in multiple films and the vote gets split and you don't end up winning. But I sort of like that.
I kind of like it, but after, I think, the 3rd or 4th award show, they changed the rules where you're only nominated and you can only win for one movie. Yeah.
They also had Best Director for a drama and Best Director for comedy.
Which I think they should still separate.
I think that would be
like the Golden Globes does.
Yeah, like the Golden Globes. And a category that was only for the first year, Outstanding Picture and Unique and Artistic Picture. So I don't know if that means blockbuster and arty, nose up in the air movie.
Like hoity-toity.
The hoity-toity film.
Thinking man's movie, yes.
Yeah. And The Jazz Singer, which was the first talkie, as we all know, that film was not in competition because it was a talkie and everything else was a silent film. Yeah. So it was awarded an honorary
because they didn't make it eligible in the competitive field, which was interesting because there was still that pull between silence and sound, and they weren't sure that sound was going to be a viable entity.
Right.
Well, apparently it was.
Yeah. The other little tidbit about that is the award that was only given out that first year, the title award category, which was the guy who writes in a silent film all the little short, witty, or dramatic, I guess, depending upon the film, text that the audience would read. And what a difficult job that person had.
Because you had to tell the whole narrative of the story in very concise, small text. Yes.
Yeah, so that's an interesting category that went away.
Well, the Academy continued to expand. They started adding categories as they saw fit.
Right.
They added a Best Sound category in the 29-30 year. They added animated short film in 1930, live action short in 1931-32 ceremony. But I think the big one was in 1936, they finally introduced an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor and Supporting Actress.
Right.
Which I know we've talked about before because we love Gail Sondergaard so much.
Yes, and she won the first one.
She won the first one for Anthony Adverse. And our good old boy Walter Brennan won the first one for Come and Get It.
Yeah. The other thing that came into play, and you can see how the Academy over the years, sometimes they're very slow to adapt to what's happening in the culture. But in 41, they started Best Documentary Short Film.
Yes.
And then in 43, Best Documentary Feature Film. And in one of the things I read about that, it was in response to Hollywood's support of World War II.
Yes, absolutely. I didn't really realize this, but there wasn't a Best Oscar for costume design until 1948.
Wow.
And there wasn't one for hair and makeup until 1981.
That is hair and makeup in 1981?
1981,
okay, that is amazing.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And Best Animated Feature did not come into play until 2001.
Thank you, Pixar and Disney, for that, I'm sure.
Exactly.
But think about all the great animated movies that didn't get a chance because there was no category.
Yeah. Most recently, in 2009, we know the Academy increased the number of Best Picture nominees to 10.
Which, very questionable decision, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are on the fence about that.
Yeah, not so sure about that. And I love that it's like, it could be up to 10. Like, in the first few years, there were like 7 or 8. And it was, just give me 5 nominees.
Yeah.
That's all I want.
If anything, I think they should increase the actor categories because there's so many.
Well, at least divide them into comedy and drama because
Yes,
it's apples and oranges.
It is kind of apples and oranges. Yeah.
How do you compare Jack Lemmon or Peter Sellers to Marlon Brando or someone of that ilk?
Yeah, exactly. The most recent category that's been added, which is kind of I think exciting,
long overdue.
Yeah, long overdue, is the casting director category, but it won't be in competitive Oscars until 2026.
I think that's right.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Which is great. They so deserve it.
Yeah. Let's talk about the statue.
That is one of my favorite things to talk about.
I love talking about it.
I love the history of the actual statue.
Have you ever held one?
I have held one.
Okay.
I've actually held a couple.
I bet you have.
I have held a couple, yes.
I think I might know two people.
I'm not going to lie, yes. Actually, I've held 3.
Okay.
And one I can't talk about because there's an NDA involved in it.
Okay, yeah. You don't want to talk about that. You don't want to talk about that.
But the Oscar statue itself was designed by MGM's great art director, Cedric Gibbons.
Yes.
He was an original founding member of the Academy, and he was Louis B. Mayer's art director. So Mayer said, hey, Cedric, design this idea for a statue.
Yeah, fun fact, he also designed Louis B. Mayer's beach house in like 6 weeks. It was designed and built and put together.
I'm sure that MGM paid for it.
I'm sure they did too.
Well, the Oscar itself, it's 13 and a half inches tall.
Right.
It weighs 8.5 pounds. It's Art Deco style, and it depicts a knight leaning on a sword, standing on a reel of film with 5 spokes that represent the 5 original branches of the Academy. Mm-hmm. Actors, writers, directors, producers, technicians. Another little fun tidbit, because I love the design story about this thing. There's a Mexican movie star and filmmaker named Emilio Fernandez. Who was a great friend of actress Dolores Del Rio, who, of course, at the time was dating Cedric Gibbons. Well, Emilio says that he was the model for the actual Oscar statue, that Cedric Gibbons needed a model, Dolores hooked him up, and he posed for the statue.
Okay.
It's never been really corroborated or really proven, but he said it for years.
Okay.
So he may or may not have been Oscar.
And George Stanley actually sculpted the Oscar.
I think he's so cool. Some of his other works ended up being, and if you're from Los Angeles, you'll totally get this. There's a great sculpture of Sir Isaac Newton up by the Griffith Park Observatory. That's his work. And there's this great statue that I love that's at the very beginning of the Hollywood Bowl. I think it's called Muse of Music, Dance, Drama. And it's this wonderful sculpture that's also George Stanley's work.
Oh, wow.
So
I
very
did not
gifted
realize that.
Sculptor.
Just quickly back to Cedric Gibbons. He himself seems the perfect person to have crafted the design because he was nominated 39 times and won the Oscar 11 times.
Yeah.
So, that's amazing.
He's a rock star.
He is a rock star. The other thing that's interesting is during the war, because the Academy Award, the Oscar, is made out of bronze and then plated in 24 karat gold.
Yes.
But during World War II, there was a shortage in metals, and so they made it out of plaster. And I understand that.
Wouldn't you felt a little gypped on those years?
Well, I did, and I looked into it. And I was like, okay, good. They got to
replace them,
trade it in and get. But that would have been a bummer.
Yeah, well, there was a period that they actually made them at a solid gold.
Wow.
It started bronze. It was 24 karat gold plated, but then there was for a while it was absolute solid gold statue. But then, of course, I think it was in 2016 that they went back to the bronze being the base.
Okay.
Again, I would feel a little gypped.
I would feel like, come on, I want the
gold.
solid gold one. The other thing that I found interesting is they make more Oscars per year than they actually need because they don't know about ties and what team is going to necessarily win. Yeah. And so there's more Oscars than they need for any given year. And they just house them in the Academy vault if they don't use them all.
Yeah. Also in that same line of thinking, they also engrave a plate for every single person nominated so that they're ready and available. And then the ones that don't win and don't have to be put onto an Oscar, they destroy recycle.
I thought, though, now, don't they have an inscription
You can
booth?
get it. You can get it done there, but they have them ready in case you just you're not there or
slap it on there, and
which is really cool.
Yeah, let's talk about the naming. of the
Oh,
Oscar.
yes. So many theories about the naming of the Oscar.
Yeah. Yeah. One is that the Academy librarian thought it looked like her uncle, whose name was Oscar. So
Yes,
she
Margaret Herrick.
is said to have nicknamed it
Yes.
Oscar.
Which the Academy Library is now named after Margaret Herrick, and it's a fantastic place. You should all check it out.
Yeah. And of course, Betty Davis said that it was named after one of her ex-husbands, who apparently his bum looked like the back of the Oscar. We don't know about either of those two theories, but you have something that you found that it seems like it might be more legitimate as to who named it.
Oh, because there's other theories about it, but Bruce Davis, who was a former executive director of the Academy, he credits a woman named Eleanor Lilleberg. She was a secretary at the Academy when the award was first introduced, and she oversaw the pre-ceremony handling of the award. And her brother was this artist named, I think it's Einar Lilleberg, who was kind of a well-known artist, and he wrote his autobiography, and in it, he mentions that his sister Eleanor thought that the statue looked like this Norwegian army veteran that they knew, whose name was Oscar, because he stood straight and tall, and that she was sort of the first one to ever really call it Oscar. So I think a lot of historians are starting to believe that she might have been the very first person, and I don't think a lot of people know that story.
Interesting. We have a lot more to talk about, including the ownership of the Oscar and lost Oscars. But before we do that, let's jump into our Hollywood pop quiz.
Well, of course, the pop quiz today is going to be about the Oscars. And it's a fun one. The question is, there's only been one time in Oscar history that two different actors have won Academy Awards for playing the same character.
Oh, this is a good one.
Who was it?
All right. We will be right back with more about Oscar history and the answer to our pop quiz after this.
All right, Steve and Ann will be right back, but first another stop on the Hollywood tour. Keeping with the Oscar theme of this week's show, like Steve and Ann were discussing, the most important prop in the Academy Awards could be the Oscar statuette itself. But some people say it's the sealed 6x9-inch booklet in the Oscars envelope that holds the award winners' names. Well, did you know that the Academy Award winners were not always kept secret? Get this, at that very first ceremony in 1929, the winners were announced 3 months prior to the award ceremony. That was held at a private reception and banquet in the famous Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel on Hollywood Boulevard. That was the ceremony that, as Steve said, lasted only 15 minutes. Well, from 1930 onward, results were handed to all the major newspapers the morning of the ceremony. That was so the stories could run that night. But there was one condition: the papers couldn't publish the names until after the ceremony was over, usually in the 11 p.m. edition of that paper. Well, naturally, one newspaper broke their promise. It was the LA Times in 1940. They actually published the list in their 7 p.m. edition, so most of the attendees knew the winners' names as they entered the ballroom. There was no surprise when the winners' names were announced. So after that point, the Academy said enough is enough. They decided that the winners' names would be kept in sealed envelopes until they were opened on stage, and it's been that way ever since. And now the winners of our favorite Hollywood podcast hosts, Steve and Ann from Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
Wow, even our Hollywood tour today is Oscar themed. Imagine that.
I know. All right, so since 1951, all Academy Award winners have to sign an agreement that they will not sell or otherwise dispose of the Oscar statuette, nor permit it to be sold or disposed of by operation of law without first offering to sell it to the Academy for the sum of $1.
What a sweet deal for the Academy.
A very sweet deal for the Academy. So,
well, they did that because people started selling their Oscars, which is so awful.
It's so awful. And so, well, aside from who we've talked about before, Harold Russell sold his Oscar because he was trying to pay for the medical bills of his wife's illness.
I know. We're going to forgive Harold. I think he's quoted saying, my wife's health is so much more important than this statue.
Yeah.
Which, okay, we get you, Harold Russell, and we love you.
Right.
In 1989, Michael Todd's grandson actually tried to sell Todd's Best Picture Oscar for the 1956 production of Around the World in 80 Days. But
really?
Notice 89, it was after the agreement. So
Yes.
basically, the Academy stopped that on a dime.
Okay. So even if it was won prior to 1951,
Yes.
you still could not.
You could.
You could sell it.
You could sell it.
Right.
Any Oscar won up to 1950, it's fair game.
Right.
As we know, Orson Welles' heirs sold his 1941 Oscar for Citizen Kane.
Right.
I think it sold for $861,000.
Yeah. Well, it was lost for a little while, and then
Yeah.
it kind of resurfaced, and
And then those greedy heirs got a hold of it and
very
sold
mysterious.
it.
Same with Vivien Leigh's family.
Yes.
They auctioned her Best Actress Oscar from Gone with the Wind for $563,000.
I know. And you know what? When they first introduced the Best Supporting Actor and Actress category, they didn't get an Oscar. They got a plaque.
Oh, that's just wrong.
Yeah, well, they ended up stopping that and they replaced the plaques for the people that had them.
Okay.
But in 2012, Mary Astor's plaque was sold at auction. It was just a little
Really?
plaque and it
Okay.
was sold for $171,000. That wasn't even an Oscar. That was just a little plaque that you got.
Oh, my word.
So it was a very lucrative
Yes, yeah.
memorabilia piece to have.
Right. I mean, even Mary Pickford's heirs, they also tried to sell it, but Pickford had signed an agreement. I guess it was in
Yes.
1976.
I think so.
So that superseded the fact that she had won it prior to 1951, and they were not allowed to sell
Yeah.
her Oscars.
And I think probably the most recent person to sell an Oscar was in 2022. It was the Oscar for cinematographer Clyde Davina, who won an Oscar for DPing the silent film White Shadows in the South Seas, which was at the second Oscar ceremony.
Okay.
So, and that thing sold for $144,000. And that just happened. So,
Wow,
so
okay.
people that have Oscars out there, they're still selling them.
They're still selling them. I wouldn't mind having one.
Yeah, why not?
But I think I want to win it. I don't want to buy it. That just
know.
doesn't seem
But
right.
you know, besides Oscars being sold, sometimes they were actually stolen.
Yes.
Sometimes they went missing by nefarious means.
Yes.
So there's a really fun history of people who've lost their Oscars or had their Oscars stolen, things like that.
So talk about Margaret O'Brien,
Yes.
because I don't know that story.
Hers is my favorite story, I
Okay.
think, because, she was one of the recipients of the Juvenile Oscar, which was a little mini version of the Oscar. It wasn't a
Again,
full-size one.
Unfair, but whatever.
She won it for Meet Me in St. Louis, so it was
Okay,
1944.
okay, yeah, makes sense.
She got the Juvenile Oscar, and 10 years later, her mother got really sick, and the family maid offered to take the award home and polish it. Well, the maid never came back. The Oscar was never seen again.
Oh my goodness.
Until the early 1990s, when the little Oscar popped up at a flea market in Pasadena.
Oh my
They were,
gosh.
they wanted to sell it for $500. And so a couple of people who knew Margaret saw it and they pulled their money, they bought it, and they were able to return it to
Wow.
Margaret.
And
Yeah.
Margaret O'Brien is still with us.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm so happy that she
I
got
know.
it back.
To be fair, when she did lose her Oscar, the Academy did replace it.
Did they replace it with a full size or a
You know what?
miniature?
I don't know.
Okay. Margaret, what happened?
I think they might have done it with a full size because I don't know that they kept the mold for the juvenile Oscar
makes sense.
once they stopped
Yeah.
giving those out.
Yeah.
So Margaret got a replacement, but she was very happy to get the original, the little guy.
Yeah. Hattie McDaniel's Oscar also went missing. Now, do I
Yes.
have this right? It was being housed at Howard University.
It's an interesting story of how it even came to be because when she died when I think she died in 53, she bequeathed the Oscar, which was actually the plaque because she
was supporting
a
actress.
supporting actress. But it took, because of family drama and all these things, internally with her family, it took 10 years to even get to Howard. So
Okay.
it got to Howard, I think, in 1962 or 3. And then somewhere along the way, in the archives of Howard University, they either stuck it in a box and forgot about it, but it was lost. And they couldn't find it.
One of the stories that I heard about it was there was unrest on campus,
Yes.
and that somebody threw it in the Potomac River.
I've heard that story
Don't
too.
know if that's
yeah.
true, but
Yeah.
So eventually it was either found or replaced.
It was replaced. It was.
Okay.
I don't think it was ever found.
was never
so
found.
finally, and it just happened. Like it was September 26th of last year.
Okay.
The Academy finally replaced her Oscar
Good.
to Howard University.
Good.
And I just want to say, Howard University, don't lose it again.
Yeah, don't lose it again. Should we talk about the stolen Oscars in 2000?
Yes.
That was a weird story.
Drama.
Yeah, lots of drama.
Yeah.
So 3 weeks before the awards are to begin,
Yeah.
55 Oscars are being driven from Chicago to Los Angeles, and they disappear.
What a story that is.
I know, right?
Yeah,
I mean, how did they think they were going to get away with it? It was the delivery guys, right?
I know. It was. A little bit later, a guy named Willie Fulgear, he found 52 of those Oscars plastic wrapped in their shipping crates in a trash bin behind a store in Koreatown in Los Angeles.
They got there in time, though, for the ceremony.
They did, thanks to our hero, Willie,
right?
Who actually, I don't know if you guys probably remember, but they made a big deal out of Willie. They invited him to the Oscars. Billy Crystal,
cool.
thanked him from the stage. And so he was the hero of the day there.
Because it takes some time to make those Oscars. They don't just pop them out.
Yes. A thing that I find interesting is they ended up finding out that one of the three guys, they eventually found the three guys who did it. One of the three guys turned out to be Willie's half brother.
Oh,
but they ended up doing their due diligence. So they investigated, and Willie was not involved.
Okay,
it was
good.
just happenstance.
I'm so glad to hear
it was
that.
just the weirdest coincidence that Willie was the guy who found him in the dumpster behind the store in Koreatown.
Now, just jumping back slightly, there was a story that I had never heard. Again, this is from Michael Schulman's book. He talks about a guy winning the award for a category that doesn't exist anymore, Best Motion Picture Story. This is in 1957. Deborah Carr hands out the award to someone named Robert Rich.
Yes.
For a film called The Brave One. Nobody comes up to accept it. Nobody knows who Robert Rich is. And it turns out the producers claim that he's some ex-GI, that, he wrote the story. Well, it was really Dalton Trumbo.
Yes.
Who was part of the Hollywood 10, and was accused of being a communist and was blacklisted. And so he used the name Robert Rich. He couldn't believe he won. He said, if this is the kind of stuff that's winning, it's like Hollywood needs to up their quality.
Rethink, what you're putting out there. I know, I love that story. Yeah. Also, another one that went missing, it's still gone to this day, was in 1972, the documentary Marjo won. And it was all about that evangelistic guy, Marjo Gortner, who was like the teen evangelistic guy. And it had two producers, and they came on stage. When they were called to stage, only one of them was present.
Okay.
So only one came up to get the award. So the other Oscar just stayed there, and no one knows what happened to it.
It disappeared.
It never made its way to the rightful owner. They never saw it again. So somewhere in somebody's closet, there's...
Somebody's closet.
Yeah, there's an Oscar from 72. We have to talk about the Best Picture Oscar for Gone with the Wind.
Oh, okay, yes.
Yes, that's a good one.
Yes.
Because in 1999, the King of Pop, Michael Jackson, as we all know, he was an eclectic collector of things like monkey bones and elephant man bones and monkeys and things
exotic
like that.
Animals.
But he ended up paying $1.5 million at auction for producer David O. Selznick's Oscar for Best Picture for Gone with the Wind. The pre-sale estimate had ranged from $200,000 to $300,000, but of course Michael had to have it, so he paid $1.5 million for it. Well, after he died, when they were settling his estate, they began to inventory everything that was at the Neverland Ranch.
Right.
And one thing that did not show up was the Oscar. They could not find it anywhere. And to this day, that Oscar has never resurfaced.
Wow.
So who knows what happened there?
Who knows where it is?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Macaulay Culkin, give that Oscar back.
All right. A couple of people that have refused, a handful of people that have refused the Oscar. One that I'd never heard of that you talk about, Dudley Nichols.
Dudley Nichols. He was the first. He was a trendsetter there.
Yeah. So he was a screenwriter, first person to reject it, citing the Academy's mistreatment of writers, which after the strike last summer, I kind of get.
Yeah. As the story goes, the Academy, they shipped it to him twice.
Oh,
he sent
he
it
kept
back
refusing
twice.
it.
But then many years later, once the labor dispute between the writers had been settled, he finally accepted it.
He did accept it.
He
Okay,
finally
good,
accepted it.
good.
But still, he made a statement.
Now, there are two other very famous people that have refused. One is, of course, George C. Scott.
George C. Scott. It's funny because the first year he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for The Hustler, I think in 1961.
Okay.
And he asked the Academy to remove his name from the ballot. He said,
He didn't want to compete.
He didn't want to compete. And he said, and I love his quote, he said, "It's like a weird beauty pageant or personality test. I take the position that actors should not be forced to out-advertise and stab each other in the back."
Yeah, that's...
So he was not having the whole competitive nature of it.
And he kept saying over and over again, I don't want to be nominated. I don't want to... So,
he warned them.
What's the famous Maya Angelou quote about when they show you who they are, believe them?
Yes.
Like George C. Scott kept saying, hey, I don't want this. So when he is given it for Patton...
He finally wins it for Patton. And I think at the time he was at an ice hockey game or something in New York. But he did send the producer, Frank McCarthy, up there to take it momentarily, basically to refuse it, and gave it back to the Academy. But he had another great quote about how it was just ridiculous that actors have to compete. I think he called it a meat parade. That was it.
Oh, a
which
meat
I loved.
parade.
A meat
As
parade.
in M-E-A-T.
Yes. So, again, he refused the Oscar.
Yeah.
But, he did end up showing up in 1982, which everybody was shocked.
He actually went?
He actually went. He wasn't nominated.
Okay.
He just showed up.
He maybe just liked to party.
And there's a famous story where, the Variety columnist who we all love, Army Archer, he called out to him. He goes,
George
hey,
C. Scott,
hey
come
George,
over here.
your Oscar's waiting for you at the Academy. Go get it.
Oh my gosh, that is too funny. Of course, the other person very famously refused the Oscar is Marlon Brando, who did not get up on stage, was not at the Academy Awards. He was protesting against Hollywood's treatment of Native Americans.
Yes. Which, famous Oscar ceremony where he sends this actress, an activist named Sacheen Littlefeather, to go up there and make a statement.
Right.
And I think she said basically that Marlon Brando is very regretful that he cannot accept this award because of the treatment of American Indians in this country today on the television, on reruns, and recent happenings at Wounded Knee. Mm-hmm. She was booed at first, but then I think it really sunk in the statement he was making. And then there was great cheers, great applause, which drowned out the few that were booing.
Yeah.
And so, that was a very powerful statement I think he made there.
Definitely. And one that this year, we don't know who's going to win, but this could be a real full circle moment.
It really could.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah. Let's just throw out a few fun factoids about the Oscars.
Yes. One of my favorites is, and there's so many, but one of my favorites is, I call it Joan versus Betty.
Oh, we love Joan versus Betty.
Because everybody knows that Betty Davis and Joan Crawford had this huge rivalry.
Yes.
And so when Betty Davis was nominated for Best Actress for Whatever Happened to Baby Jane in 1962, old arch rival Joan Crawford was not to be outdone. And so what Joan did, and this is brilliant, she goes to all four of the other nominees against Betty, and she goes, hey, if for some reason you're not going to be there, can I accept your Oscar on your behalf? Well, one person took her up on it, was Anne Bancroft, who was nominated that night for The Miracle Worker because she was doing a play in New York. She couldn't get there. So Anne Bancroft says, sure, why not?
Yeah.
Well, lo and behold, the winner's Anne Bancroft. So Joan Crawford gets that very self-satisfying moment of breezing past Betty Davis behind the stage and accept Anne Bancroft's Oscar on her behalf.
And I don't know how you feel about the series, but Ryan Murphy's series about Betty Davis and Joan Crawford, it depicts it so beautifully.
Beautifully.
It's just a great story.
And Jessica Lange was
she was
perfect
so good in
as
that.
Joan Crawford.
Yeah.
Susan Sarandon, okay.
But Jessica Lange was
spot on.
She was
spot
awesome.
on. I think we have to talk about the streaker.
Oh, of course.
As we all probably know, some people may not, there was a streaker at the Academy Awards, which has brought up a lot of controversy about whether it was planned or whether it was organic.
Yes.
It happened in the 1974 Academy Awards ceremony.
When streaking was a thing.
It was very popular. There was even a song called The Streak.
The Streak.
Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do.
So there was this guy, this 34-year-old guy named Robert Opel. He ended up sneaking backstage. He hid behind some props, and when the time came,
and he's naked.
He had a jumpsuit on. He unzipped the jumpsuit, popped out of it, and just as
David out of his
yes, well, so right as David Niven is up on stage about to announce the Best Picture winner, this guy bolts behind Niven. Caught on national television. I mean, what a scandal. What a shocking moment. But David Niven, he has the best comeback.
Oh.
He said, he doesn't miss a beat. And he says, "Isn't it fascinating to think that probably the only laugh that man will ever get in his life is by stripping off and showing his shortcomings?"
Which I thought it was so elegantly played, and just what a perfect gentleman.
But there was a lot of buzz that the streaker was planted and that David Niven had written that line in advance, that it was all done for publicity and to drum up interest in the Academy. But then again, David Niven's sons say absolutely not.
Yeah.
He had no idea. That was just my father being dry and witty, and he just came up with it on his own.
I'm going to go with that.
I'm going with that too.
Yeah, I'm going to go with that. So let's finish off this episode by throwing out some fun factoids about the Oscars. Okay, oldest winner.
Yes.
I have that as James Ivory, which surprised me.
I don't think I knew that.
He won for a Best Adapted Screenplay for a movie called Call Me By Your Name. He was 89 years old.
Wow. Good on you.
We got time, Steve. We got time.
It's never too late. I love that.
Can I just throw out the youngest, which most people know is...
You've got to throw it out.
Tatum O'Neal won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress at 10 years old. Justin Henry, who was in Kramer versus Kramer, played the young boy in that.
So wonderful.
Was the youngest nominated at 8 years old.
Yes, I love that.
Okay, what you got?
Well, you know what? I love this, and I think a lot of people know this. What was the longest Oscar speech ever given on record?
Oh, I know it. Is it Greer Garson?
It is Greer Garson. Apparently, when she won for Mrs. Miniver, she rambled on for 6 minutes, which apparently that's a long time when you're giving a speech. So, and people made fun of her, and she even joked about it herself. I think in the next ceremony, she said, "I'm here to finish my speech."
Yes.
But the shortest Oscar speech, anybody know? Any takers?
I do know this one, but
and there's a lot. But it was Patty Duke for The Miracle Worker. She just got up and said, "Thank you."
And that was it. There's another one that's really, really short, too, that's a female actress.
Gloria Graham says, "Thank you very much." So she had 4 words.
Okay, so she had 4 words.
And I think Joe Pesci also had a very short one. He said, "It's a privilege, thank you."
Yes.
So, but Patty Duke wins the award for 2 words.
Wow.
Thank you.
Okay, who do you have down as the most wins?
The most wins? Well, I have them.
I have some
in categories.
Oh, you do? Okay,
I
I have most overall wins as being someone that, if you really think about it, makes sense. Walt Disney.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, won 22.
22 Oscars.
Now, Edith Head, I have as the most wins by a female.
Yes, she is.
She won 8 Academy Awards for costume design.
That's impressive.
It's very impressive. Walt Disney had the most nominations also at 59 nominations.
Here's a good one. Who was the first woman to be nominated and win for Best Picture? It was actually, and it didn't happen until 1973. It was Julia Phillips for The Sting.
Oh, she was one of the producers.
She was. And I spent a lovely Thanksgiving one time with Julia Phillips.
Oh, wow.
And sat right next to her, and wow, the stories she had. She was a firecracker.
What a fabulous film, too. One of maybe in my top 10.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, there's so much more to say, and we just don't have time.
I know, so many things we could say.
Yeah, but you know what? We'll look forward to seeing the results and see if there's any scandals or slaps or missed envelopes or anything that happens at this year's Academy Awards.
Gun to your head, Best Picture this year.
Oh, what's going to win?
Yeah.
What's going to win is Oppenheimer.
Yes. What do you want to win?
Well, I really loved Past Lives. Yes. I really loved that.
1,000% agree.
Yes, on both.
Oppenheimer's going to win.
Yeah.
Past Lives should win.
Okay. Can you tell me who you want to win and who's going to win for actor and actress?
Yes.
Okay.
For Best Actress, who's going to win is Lily Gladstone for
Killers of the Flower Moon.
Who should win is Emma Stone for Poor Things.
She had brilliant, brave work.
Phenomenal, brave, unique, pushing the boundaries work like I've never seen.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
What about you?
I'm going to say Lily Gladstone is going to win.
Yeah.
I am a huge Annette Bening fan. She's been nominated multiple times.
Give Annette an Oscar, people.
Yeah, I thought her work was really, really brave, moving. Yeah, she should win in my book.
Yes.
Okay.
Actor.
Okay, this is a tough category for me to pick because I loved all of those performances.
Yes.
But I'm going to go with Cillian Murphy. I do think Paul Giamatti. I think they all should win an Oscar, but I think Cillian Murphy. I just love him.
Yes, I think he's definitely going to win.
Yeah.
I want Jeffrey Wright to win.
Yeah,
I thought that that performance was so fresh and layered, and the comedy involved. Comedians don't win, though.
I know. But he's a wonderful actor.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Oh, Steve, we could just go on and on. Let's give the answer to this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz.
Right. And the question was, what two actors have won an Oscar for playing the same character? Any guesses?
I could guess, but...
Well, the character was Vito Corleone from the Godfather saga. And of course, Marlon Brando won in 1972 for the original Godfather. 2 years later, Robert De Niro won Best Supporting Actor for playing the younger version of him in The Godfather Part 2.
Of course. More Oscar trivia. We would love it if you would follow us on social media, and we would love it if you would click subscribe on YouTube.
Subscribe.
Yeah. And give us a good review, if you wouldn't mind. Our handle is @FromBeneathTheHollywood
And we love hearing from you. We're getting great emails, and keep them up. Please contact us with any thoughts, questions, opinions, anything. info@FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com.
That's this week's view.
From Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
You've been listening to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign with Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara, the podcast that celebrates amazing stories of Tinseltown from its golden era. Join us next week for another episode and learn something else about Hollywood you probably never knew. Take a moment and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review. And tell your friends about us too. It'll help grow the podcast. Visit Steve's website at FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com. The executive producers are Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara. Executive producer and post-production supervisor, Lindsay Schnebley. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like The Box of Oddities and The Shallow End with Schnebley and Toth. Copyright 2024, all rights reserved. That's a wrap.